All right. God help me. I really like Kipling when he goes genre. When he is in his genre mode, I really like him. This is A Matter of Fact by Rudyard Kipling from his collection Many Inventions. And this is a good old sea yarn where three journalists are on a boat coming out of Johannesburg and are heading to England. And at first, when the story starts, it's like, oh God, these guys are going to exchange stories. And we're going to have somebody recount some kind of some tale that happened to them. But no, they get interrupted in the many, many tales that these three journalists have, an American, a South African, and basically Kipling, British Indian, mostly Britisher at this point, have. And Kipling, the narrator, is the most seasoned and almost like kind of retired from journalism for the most part, or still in his hand in journalism, but obviously has kind of gotten to the end of that profession. And no, the fantastic tale happens to them. There is some kind of natural disaster that happens. There's giant swells on the sea. The captain of the ship seems to think that what's happened is probably an underground volcano has kind of gone up, and it's displaced water, several hundred feet up. So everything is they're having to kind of careen through giant super waves. And in the midst of this, it knocks up a hunk of land with a genuine sea monster on it that looks like it gets sluiced open and is bleeding to death with its mate circling around it and in its death throes. And this is truly described by Kipling as kind of a Cthulhu kind of like horror. It has got white blind eyes because it's a creature of the deep. It's got tentacles. It is truly something of horror, out of a horror show, and you can see that like things fished from the deep seas have already come probably actual to notice, and they're probably tiny, but this is blown up as a gigantic sea monster, and they watch it die, and the other thing bellows. The mate, they think is the female, bellows in agony, sadness, and then goes away, takes off, and they're left. And the three journalists are like, holy shit. And the American is the most excited and writes up a whole big story on it. And the other two do write up stories on it, but they're like, yeah, we're never filing this. This is never, no one's ever going to believe us. But the American's like, oh yes, I'm gonna sell it to the British newspapers if you're not gonna sell it, because that's the big game, that's the big show where I can sell it. And they're like, no, you're not. No, you're not. The Kipling narrator is like, look, I'm 700 years older than you, and I know that this isn't gonna fly. And indeed, he can't sell it anywhere in Britain. And the only where he's like, well, you can sell it in the United States where they don't care if they're printing the truth or not. And he's like, oh, fuck. And it's like, yeah, it is hopeless. And at the end of the story, the Kipling narrator says, very kind of meta-ly, never mind, Keller, it isn't your fault. It's the fault of your country. If you'd been 700 years older, you would have done what I am going to do. What are you going to do? Tell it as a lie. Fiction? This was with a full-blooded disgust of a journalist for the illegitimate branch of the profession. You can call it that if you like. I shall call it a lie. And a lie it has become, for the truth is a naked lady, and if by accident she is drawn up from the bottom of the sea, it behooves a gentleman either to give her a print petticoat, or to turn his face to the wall and vow that he did not see. So, print petticoat it is of fiction. It's a kind of a way of saying that this fantastic tale, it's just a lie. It's not real. It's not real at all. And I looked at the Wikipedia page for this because it actually came up as one of the stories. Probably came up as one of the stories actually having its own little stub, because there's a recording of Kipling reading just a little fragment of it, and a kind of contemporaneous thing of him reading it and being recorded reading it, where Kipling has just a very kind of regular bog standard kind of British voice. You can hear very faintly because it's an old recording. It sounds like he's standing far back in a giant tunnel, and you can hear him reading it. Apparently, the critical reception at the time was that it wasn't believable, but no, it's totally believable. But as a kind of a Cthulhu Depths kind of story that way. But it's kind of hilarious that in the story, Kipling's like, yeah, well, no one's going to believe me if I try and sell this as fact, so I'm going to make it into a fantastical tale, of which people are like, I don't believe in fantastical tales at this point. I haven't had that much education on it, so I don't believe it. So, yeah, that is A Matter of Fact by Rudyard Kipling. I enjoy Kipling when he is not going on about the supremacy of the white race, or how women, this does not, it does have foreigners in it, but apparently the Dutch are okay, and the South Africans are basically kind of like the British India, British, the Anglo Indians, so they're all brothers, so there's no kind of racism or xenophobia in the book. We do have this thing of like, the truth is a naked lady, and if by accident she's drawn up from the bottom of the sea, there's this whole kind of chivalrous thing, which I guess is like you get into a bit of the sexism, but for the most part, there's no female characters in the thing. So this is like the most unproblematic story of Kipling, and it actually gets to show Kipling kind of flexing those fantastic muscles, and of description and excitement and adventure. That's like, okay, yeah, this guy's a good writer. Except for all the content, all the stuff that he uses his great talents for. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.